Hello and good tidings, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where our biggest game week of the year, Boxing Day, is now in the books. 21,000 or so filled all of our stadiums and they were treated to a set of results which impacted both the top and the bottom of the top flight. The Glens, they broke their Windsor hoodoo. Ballymena kept theirs over the Bandsiders. Crusaders won for the first time in feels like absolutely ages. And those formidable Invermen swerve a rather carrot-shaped blue shell and extend their lead atop the perch. A lot to talk about, so sit back, relax, because I know you're still in your PJs and enjoy this latest weekly and more edition of Kicking Match. It's that tradition for me where I record a podcast in my folks' house, the childless man that I am. And based on previous form, it's nice to welcome back Mark McGuiggan to said podcast. Hello, Mark, and happy post-Boxing Day.
Yeah, happy that weekend between Christmas and New Year, Peter.
What do you call it?
Um,
I've heard people call it like Twixmas or something.
what?
It doesn't really have a name. Is that kind of the festive period?
Yeah, the festive period's a good one. I like that.
It's my usually favourite time of the year because I just think I like cram in, at least in my head, all year, all the watching, reading, chilling out. That's the time in my head where I think I'm going to do it, and then I never do. But at least it's there. It's different this year because I'll do the wee plug in right now. I'm going to be on Radio Ulster from Monday to Friday. So Monday the 29th of December until Friday the 2nd. I'm going to be on 3 till 5 every day. So you can all send in your requests for songs if you wish, or just tune in to enjoy it, where I'm not talking about football. And I'll tell you one song which I'm not going to get a request for, and that is some Joy Division, because the Glens are not falling apart. In fact, they did use at Windsor Park. Sorry about this, Mark. Look, you've had a decent run on Boxing Days over the past few years, and on this occasion, it was not your day. It was the Glens' day, and it was Joe Thompson's day, and you hit them at a time where you're in bad form, and suddenly they're in good form, and for all those thousands of people that packed into Windsor Park, they were not a happy bunch.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of happy faces in the North Stand, all looking at us and pointing and laughing and really enjoying themselves. I think the writing was on the wall after last week's performances. Obviously, both teams very much had different results last week. The Glens having a really, really good result at home to 10-man Coleraine, and ourselves having an absolute horror show down at Mourneview Park. So, if anything, form actually didn't go out the window in a derby game. I know there's all that guff to do with, form goes out of a window in derby day and all that, but my goodness, it went by the script this time. Certainly did.
And for the Glens, they're probably thinking, what happened to us in November and even around October and the way December's been? Because they've popped out, beat Coleraine, they've beat you lot, and look totally reinvigorated. It wasn't a classic day. It was only the one goal that came through, but you kind of favour them going into pretty much every game now if they can keep up this momentum.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange one. They've had obviously those back-to-back wins and a loss against Larne, drew against Cliftonville as well there, just at the start of the month. So the sort of old school Big Six teams, they've done very well against there, but you look a little further back, a draw against Bangor, a loss at home to Dungannon, that 3-1 thumping down at Mourneview Park. So if it wasn't for that bit of a ropey month in November, we could be saying something very, very different about the Glens, and the words title and race could be entering into the lips of those at the Oval.
Wow.
But yeah, I don't think they're out of it yet. I think that blip maybe has given them a lot. It's given them a lot of work to do, obviously, but that little blip there in November has really, really threatened them. But listen, they've come good at the right time, and they always say this is a really, really busy time of the year for football. And when you're getting results like those two back to back, who can be disappointed in East Belfast?
And you might say that this little uptick in results comes when Jordan Stewart's getting a bit more consistency on the pitch. It was a maligned transfer, but without him, and you could see that on Boxing Day, without him they wouldn't be the same team.
The guy's fantastic. I loved him when he was at Linfield. just could not get him fit enough for long enough. And there were spells when he was at Windsor where he was definitely one of our best players. A fit Jordan Stewart, it would get into any team in this league, in my opinion. And what a performance from him yesterday. He just looked so composed in everything that he was doing. He was smart in his running. He was running at players. His passing was excellent. Absolutely everything about him yesterday was 10 out of 10 and well deserved man of the match, I believe.
Do you not feel as though with that back line of Glentoran's, which feels quite brittle, can be ran at, that you just had nobody on that pitch in a blue shirt that had the ability to truly penetrate them? You had your chances, but they were never at any point running back towards their goal in fear of getting done by someone with speed or just that ability on the ball that they can take it from one end to the other and try and get a shot off.
Yeah, I feel like there was obviously there's a number of times in that game where if Linfield players had been smarter, they could have broken away. I believe that there was one, well, there was two opportunities in the first half. First one where Fitzpatrick was fouled by Marcus Keane, just a real old school sort of tackle from Marcus Keane, taking the man down to stop a really good chance. Got booked for that, 100% yellow card, all fine. And then another time when Morrison was just running off the back of Kane but had no support. I wonder if he looks back on that, would he maybe think that he should have driven into the box, he should have made Kane make a decision, but he stopped the ball and waited for support to come with him. So if it was me managing that team, I would have had Fitzy or and possibly Morrison as well. Both of those guys on those defenders' toes. I believe Kamara was booked, yeah, in the first half as well for a dive. So there's both centre halves. If your opposition are booked, why not run at them? Why not make them make that decision? Linfield just didn't have enough creativity. Nothing smart, nothing wise going on either formation wise or player wise. I think that Healy's come out and swiftly blamed the players on this one this week as opposed to himself. So I just don't think there's enough creativity in that side at the minute. That's just gonna, there's nobody that's gonna get the ball and get you on the edge of your seat. It's very bland. It's very slow. Not a really good watch at the minute, to be quite honest.
And do you feel like that's what you're missing? Everyone's going to point to the lack of Joel Cooper, etc., etc. But you see every game, even recently, where the results haven't been going well. Fitzpatrick looks like he's a man all on his own, trying to pull this team up by the scruff of their neck.
100%.
And he's not the man that can really do that. He can pop up in big moments and get important goals and can really help you maintain a lead. But he's going to struggle to score without the service and without the men around him.
Yeah, I was saying this coming out of the game. Fitzpatrick is in one of those forms at the minute where he's having to both create and score. And I don't think there's a player in the league that could have done that yesterday. He's having to win the first ball, and he's got nobody near him to even pass to get a cross away. I think the formation that we're playing at the minute is a really strange watch. We've got wide men who aren't very wide, midfielders who don't know whether to press or stick. And one thing I can sort of flash back to maybe even 6 or 8 years ago, when you were watching Linfield, they always had two very good attacking fullbacks, i.e. Matty Clark, Niall Quinn, players like that who were supporting the wingers. And if there was no out ball for a winger to just throw a ball into the box, there'd always been a fullback further, just slightly back from them to play a ball to. Like the amount of times that you saw Kirk Miller playing a ball back to either Quinn or Clark, and them, the fullback putting the ball in. There was just none of that yesterday. McCulloch attacking wise isn't as sort of how do we put this? Oof, just isn't quite as good as some of the other guys we've had. I'm trying to be nice
Well,
here. He's a
he's
very
one of
very good
those.
defender, but going forward, just not quite got it like the other guys have had.
Yeah, he's one of this kind of strangely positionless defenders that you have. Like, maybe it's wrong to call Brown one of them. Eunice is somewhat coming up as this, where you're like, they're centre backs, but they're also being able to play out as wing backs as well. But they never totally excite you
Yeah.
as the long-term solution there. And it's good to have that ability to move between one or the other. But I'm sure you're frustrated sometimes going, we've got four centre-backs playing across the back line.
Yeah, it's sort of that's exactly how it's looking at the minute, to be honest. We're in a real sort of sticky wicket as the, depth of squad. That seems to be one thing that's coming up quite a bit from a lot of people at the club. The depth isn't there. We were looking at that team yesterday. I was looking at that team and trying to work out who was playing where. I obviously had a rough guess that McGee was going to play playing centre half yesterday, but he performed actually quite well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
McGee's one of them as
McGee,
well. Just he can add in a few midfield positions into
yeah,
his
McGee's sort of
repertoire.
played everywhere for us. All bar goalkeeper, I think he's had a go at. Centre mid, wide right, full back, centre half, as I said yesterday. But just none of those. I think he's a full back, to be quite honest. But he wasn't actually one of our issues yesterday, and I wouldn't actually say the centre backs were the issue yesterday. I would just say that there was no real
Yeah.
presence in midfield, and full backs and wings were non-existent as well. So all in all, a fantastic Boxing Day for me.
Glentoran, we will talk about your team a bit more in a second, but we've kind of pulled the thread a wee bit when it comes to the Blues. Look, I suggested this a number of weeks ago when it came to Linfield, that I thought that perhaps you do have some form of depth. It's not total no names, but the issue has been that the recruitment, particularly in the summer, hasn't been right, or just hasn't lived up to what the expectations were. I don't know if you believe that the Blues rested on their laurels in regards to the players that got them the title last year. They just didn't address positions that needed impact players. But I don't think, as much as there might be a bit of heat from the fan base, I don't think really Healy's in danger of not wearing the tracksuit over the next few months. But as a fan, would you want him to come out and say, this is what hasn't worked out?
I think that's in an ideal world that's where we're at. And we have a manager that comes out and says this is our problem. But over my years of knowing and watching Linfield, you get very, very little information from inside the club. We never really get updates. Well, we never really got updates up until quite recently, even about how long players might be out for or what their issues might be. So I think the Blues are very,
Well,
very
that's not totally unique, to be fair, but yes.
no, but I just think that there's a rough idea. It'd be nice to have a rough idea of what we're actually looking at with players and what's going on at the club. As we're talking about recruitment there, definitely not our finest recruitment in the summer. Just a really sort of mishmash of players coming in. I don't think there's any issues with having players like Yates and Taylor in for a bit of depth. I think the two of them aren't really at fault and have been okay when they've come on to try and affect games. I don't know where Isaac Bird's going to stand at the club. Just a player who's come in and has offered very, very little across a number of different opportunities that he's had. And as we were saying, Sean Brown came in from Lauren and seems to be a bit, he's fine. He's fine. He's a good Irish League fullback, but not quite the level of what we need to go on and grab a title by its hands. You look at the signings that Coleraine have made, you look at the solidification that Lauren have had this season, where that we are without doubt at best the third best team in this league at the moment.
It's starting to feel like that, and you are missing Offord, which we don't know if how much that would have an impact on it. He obviously started the season quite brightly. We can point to Shields being this massive influence in midfield, where he seemed like he dictated play a lot for Linfield. I know sometimes that would be from the centre back position, but he would often do that. And the thing I feel like I keep repeating when it comes to the Blues is that every team wants wingers. Okay, of course they do. But you have Morrison, and that's been a slightly shaky relationship in 2025, both on and off the pitch. But going in to 2026, if there was the ability to try and answer a transfer need for the Blues, you don't have to give me a name of a player, but what is the archetype that is like number one on your list?
Joel Cooper, he'd be good. He's a good
He would be
footballer, I
good,
like him. Yeah, so we need a creative midfielder. That's basically what we're missing. We're really, really missing that spark. Someone who could play even a 10. I hate using that sort of term for Irish League football. It's fairly modern terminology that I don't really like. But someone just in that role to play a ball in behind, to run off a defender, give Fitzy a bit of help. Long story short, so we're in that sort of we're in the we have to be in the market for that sort of player. A bit of what, not even a wild card, just someone, bit of a yeah, bit of everything, Peter. I need goals from somewhere. I need goals.
Yeah,
I just cannot see how Fitzpatrick can be left out in his own for the rest of this season because the guy needs support. He's a very, very good goal scorer. He'll take, if you give him two chances, he'll score one of them. But it's just providing that chance. So I think a creative midfielder or somebody of that ilk is exactly what we'd be looking for in the market. But listen, that's the sort of player we let go in the summer. So maybe that's not what we want.
and really, when is someone like McKee or Allen going to step up and stake their place in this team? They've forever been bench players, and when they come on, there's been the odd cameo. And you'd probably say McKee's had more high moments in a blue shirt than Allen has. But you'd like to think they've settled in. But I'm yet to go, this is a position which they could nail. Like, if Chris McKee isn't getting in this side right now, when will he get in this Blues team?
Well, I'll break it down to this. Is there a team in the league of of those, say this top four that we're sort of seeing emerge at the minute this year? Do Allen or McKee bring anything to those teams starting 11s? I don't think so
I
personally.
Yeah, I think Allen is a player that really needs a run somewhere. But McKee, I'm sure Cliftonville will take him right here, right now.
Yes, I would say that that's a different sort of thing though, because Cliftonville are in such a sort of sticky wicket
Yes.
with how things are going on. But circumstantially, he wouldn't get on for any of the teams above us. So why should we be having to play him for us if we're trying to overtake those teams? If you know where I'm coming from with that.
Would you swap Jenkins for McKee?
Yes, 100%. The way McKee's sort of being forced into a team isn't really suiting him either. I can't actually blame the player because I would nearly argue that he's probably the best finisher at the club. But he doesn't have that creative spark that we need at the minute. We need a creator. We need someone who's going to get the ball and play a ball in behind. But for so many times this season, there's 2 weeks in a row, it's been Bird for McKee. McKee's having to play this sort of number eight role, that Isaac Bird's failing to fulfill. And I think everybody in their granny knows that Chris McKee is not a number eight in a midfield. So I'd say David Healy's sort of
No.
using him as a square peg in a round hole, and that analogy is used far too often. But that's definitely what's happening. It's definitely what's happening
It
for him at the
really
minute.
is.
I do feel sorry for him because the guy has ability. The guy has a lot of heart and effort in his performances, but he's just being forced into roles that he is not suited for.
And Alex Gordon, I remember this happening and then totally forgot it did happen. What size or shape of hole could he fit into?
Sort of like I don't know, a Spanish version of Chris Shields. Hopefully, that would be very helpful.
That
But
would be very helpful. What a
the
gift
guys,
that would be for
yeah,
David Haley.
that would be a lovely Christmas present. But yeah, we're really, really struggling to get him fit. It seems. So managed a few minutes against Carrick, or was that Crusaders? Can't quite remember. One of those games, played 60 minutes for the Swifts and then was missing in action last Saturday at Mourneview. I don't know whether that was an extension of an injury, but he was not about. So then we got him on yesterday and he didn't really put a foot wrong. The guy's not a bad footballer. The guy looks like he's good enough to play for an infield, but it's just a case of getting the guy fit. And hopefully that's something that can happen because we really need a bit of change in midfield.
Well, let's go back to the Glens. They were the victors at the end of the day on Friday, and it helps them this little, let's call it a mini run, shall we?
It's two in a row, like it's 2 wins in a row.
2 wins, but they're big wins against big
Yeah,
teams that they can then
true.
go on and try and keep the W's flowing. And if they do, they can increase their foothold within this pocket of top four. And as much as we've talked about this top four all season, four will not go into three. And based on a couple of weeks ago, you would say everyone's expecting them to be on the outside looking in. They're now above Linfield on points with the same amount of games played. And it gives them now the opportunity to push on, right? If they get adding another win to go on the same amount of games as Larne, they're 8 points off them. They would be... See, Corrin have played 3 more games than them, and they're only 5 points ahead. So you might argue as well, Linfield will sit there and think we can pop up and maybe knock off Corrin. But if Glentoran are going to assert themselves and get into the top 2 or top 3, they need to try and parlay these 2 big victories into a run. Can they do it? Maybe. We've been here before.
I think they definitely got the makings of a half decent team. That performance yesterday was fantastic. Maybe against sort of a poor Linfield side, if we're going to go as far as to say that. A Linfield side out of form, certainly. But the Glens fully deserved their victory yesterday. And were, from the very start of the game, in control. There was no real time where, Mills had much to do in the Glentoran goal. A couple of basic saves, a couple of flick-on headers from Fitzpatrick that weren't really going to trouble any goalkeeper. So defensively, that on paper, that says, the Glens have performed well defensively. Linfield did another good job of making Joe Thompson and Cammy Palmer look like, I don't know, Prime Gattuso and Prime Pirlo. Every time we play those guys, they play the best game of their careers.
Joe Thompson knows how to play at Windsor, doesn't he? He
guys,
scored that goal before.
The guy's very, very frustrating as an opposition fan because he's one of those. He's a player that would remind me of, I suppose, a Barry Johnson or a Sula, even in that Larne team. A player that you hate to play against, but when he's on your side, my goodness, are you thankful he's on your side? Really, really good performance from him yesterday. I think maybe I can't work out who won man of the match yesterday between him and Thompson, or sorry, him and Stewart. But both of those very much deserving of that. Jordan Stewart going through going over old ground, like the guy's fantastic. I didn't see anything from Hoban yesterday that would make me doubt that he's a very, very good player. He did his role very, very well, and that's winning headers, being a big, strong forward, and that's exactly what you want from your forward. If he's not getting the goals, he needs to be in and about those defenders and causing a lot of havoc for them. And wing-wise, can't see anything wrong with what they did yesterday either. Really, really solid performance, and Devine will be very happy with that.
Yeah, he needed that, and they go into these games, as we talked about, thinking that if they can get the goals, that's what's maybe been lacking, because you even look at that game there yesterday, Hoban misses a few opportunities, ball swings in, maybe a better header. Early on is a kind of a decent save as well from Johns. Jenkins was right through and needs to smash that. But that's a player that we've seen before. He can be an instinctive finisher, but it's that goal from Thompson which gets the points. So we'll sit tight and see how the next few games progress for both these teams. But before we go on to any other games, I think we should talk about one of the other big stories coming out of Friday, and that was, of course, the debut of NIFL TV. Interesting enough, I asked you lot what you think of it and what your reaction was. What was your user experience with it? I was at Dungannon against Bangor, so I didn't use it. £10 was the price, famously, to watch it. You had commentators and everything, 4 games, and I'm surprised by how mixed the response has been, at least to me. Now, Irish League fans, let's be fair, I might be talking about you, dear listener, or I might be talking about somebody else. We do like to complain, all right? So perhaps most of the shouts that are being sent towards me are complaints because, well, you want to tell somebody about them. And the feeling seems to be, didn't feel as though it was worth a tenner, that they were, here's one Connor saying, one camera angle, had no close-up for replays, not the best. That being said, I'd gladly pay it as a monthly subscription for £10 for games I can't get to, / random games to neutral. Not individual games, though. I think that's the one thing that really shone for people, or stood out, that they hadn't thought of. They go down, they go, here's my £10 for Cliftonville Cruise, and they're thinking, I would really love to have a hook at the Glens Blues game here, but I can't. I would have to pay another £10. I know this was an experiment, and it's not like the format is not set in stone. But when you have people saying, "Oh, there's only one camera angle, there's not enough different angles and replays," is that the kind of thing you're expecting from a NIFL service like this?
Oh, yeah. I would at least expect some sort of replay that wasn't the same angle as the goal. The joy of watching replays in a match that you're watching on TV is you can see the close-ups, you can see maybe something you didn't see the first time around. I just don't know whether they have all the sort of ducks in a row to be able to get that sorted straight away. From what I've seen, it was a bit of a mixed bag, some sort of strange stuttering. I don't think the flares helped at the Linfield match actually,
No,
which sort of
no.
blinded a few. With
I got a picture from Ross Welsh, and I was like, "Oh no!" And then I realized what
Yeah,
it
it's a bit of
was.
a foggy screen going on. But then again, that happens, across the world. That's not something that is just unique to the Irish League. A bit of games that have actually been stopped because of the amount of flares that are on. Yeah, it just seems. I think they need to get that price point right. If you wanted to watch all four of those games, it would have been £40. Obviously, you can't watch them all at once. But there needed to be maybe an option that it's just a buy one for all sort of thing. A pass to let you watch all four games. I know this is only a trial, but I definitely think that would have to be something they look at. I know people have said League of Ireland do it for whatever €99 for the year, which is a fantastic price in my eyes. If you're really into your local football, you could Friday night you could watch whatever game you wanted, and if there was a half 5 kickoff on a Saturday or something, watch that as well. I think that's fair enough. But it just needs to be a little bit of a better presentation wise than just one camera angle, in my opinion, for people to actually get involved in it.
I see it as for what it is, right? I would buy a lot of the streams of the European games. So Lauren has got plenty of my money when they're playing against whatever it is, the Uzbekistani champions, right? And that's because I just want to get access to the game. And I don't expect there to be lots of different angles. It's just a way to view it. Long term, £10, maybe if it's a one off, makes sense. Subscription is probably what people are looking for. And let's be fair, look across the media landscape. That is what the model is. And it felt as though on Friday, the reason why it was all individual games and you had to pay it individually is because they want to try and establish, well, how much were people looking, like we all know Glens Blues is going to be the one that gets in the most dough, and then you filter through it. Was there a huge amount of interest in North Belfast compared to Mid Ulster? There's a good way to try and figure that out. So what people are also need to remember here is that there was costs with having commentator, pundit, and then a camera person. So you're saying there might be at least 25 to 30 streams need to be bought before you're even out of the red. And I
Yeah,
know some of the numbers from some clubs when it comes to their streams, a lot, some are more popular than others. But again, it's getting into the mode of when
yeah,
people think, okay, I'm not going to get to that game, I can watch it on the stream. And many people are also blessed with the fact that the BBC are showing way more games than they've ever done before, and with that comes the production. Like we have here from Lewis, 10 or too much, camera operator was sleeping for half the time. You see when you really realize if there's just one shot the whole time, it's a long time. Keeping Tabs says for a tenner, I'd have liked the option to watch all the games, could have flicked over occasionally. Yeah, that's probably just for us Irish League sickos, to be fair, who would want to do that. But it probably helped a lot of fans who weren't able to get to these games. So that's the positive, and I'm interested to see where it goes from here. I see, honestly, I would take a on-demand NIFL subscription service, even without commentary. If I could get access to all the games all the time, and if it was a Tuesday night and I wanted to watch Coleraine against Dungannon, boom, and it's just that feed going back and forward, that would be great. But it feels like we're a wee bit far away from there, but baby steps. We will get there eventually. What would you say then was the biggest result outside of the one at Windsor Park? And here, before we go on, I know this is a semi-regular event now with the Boxing Day thing, but you must have sat there at Windsor thinking, this is great. It wasn't a full stadium, but this just feels so different than your run-of-the-mill Saturday. I know you don't play many Saturday games, but compared to your run-of-the-mill Saturday at 3 o'clock, it must have
It
felt
was far
magic.
better. And having to wash my take my infield glasses off here. Saints fans were fantastic. Like really loud, really supported the team. Obviously, away from home, I think that there's going to be a lot less sort of, I hate to put it this way, but hangers on as such, people who don't go at all, just turn up for Boxing Day. I think, I think they got 2,700 tickets, real scramble for those. But of those 2,700, fantastic, all of them. So fair play, supported the team really well. But I just do not know why all these people just turn up for one day. Cannot grasp the fact that you can have, I don't know how many were at Windsor yesterday, 10,000 probably, slightly in and around that. And our average home attendance would probably be in and around 1,800. I know that it's special because it's Boxing Day and you're off work and all this jazz. And there's so many other arguments as to why people can and can't attend. But it was so good to see the full stadium. I think the scarves that the Blues put out, I know we're getting slated for and we're getting laughed at. Haha, all the scarves are in the bin down Tate's Avenue and all this jazz. Um, but I thought that made it look really good at the start of the game. I thought that was a nice initiative from the club. People are also trying to sell those in Vinted now. I saw a guy doing that, which was really sad. But anyway, it's just so good that all the games had such a good crowd, and I think the players appreciate it surely as well, because I'm sure there's weeks when you're playing away at Coleraine and you've got those loyal fans, maybe 50 to 100 bombing up from like Dungannon or somewhere or Carrick that have gone the whole way up the road to support their teams. But I'm sure the players really appreciate the fact that the fans have backed them this Boxing Day.
And it's just a part of the overall product, the feel. You saw in some of the games the players engaging with not only their own fans back in their afters, but the opposition fans. It just adds that bit of spice to it all. And look, we wouldn't be spending our time doing a podcast like this if we didn't think this is a product which has legs and is worth investing your time and money in. But we also need to remember that we are a product that needs to engage with people continually. And the people that don't go to games all the time, they are not the problem. We are not doing something. Like, we're all not into a certain sport or a certain interest out there. And no one's going, well, these guys aren't, we're the problem. It's like, no, you, whatever the sport or interest is, you just aren't engaging with me. And that may be through how it's presented online, how it goes through social media. I was drawn to the NFL eventually, and it probably comes through the fact of all that media that was accessible and the commentators and stuff like that. So I think that's one thing that'll probably be considered when we eventually come back and talk about how the on-demand service is, because the on-demand service is not going to be totally about making money. Obviously, it needs to be about making money, but it's also about how you further deliver for your fans, because you'd far rather have 20 people spending a tenner than 5 spending 15 a month. So we will come back to that, no doubt. But yes, back into your hands. What game do you want to go to next?
How about we go for the aptly named Ballymena v Coleraine,
What
because there's no name for the derby.
do you think? I know this may be bonkers, and it'll depend on teams moving in and out, but more and more, Lauren and Ballymena feels a bit potentially more scuffly, doesn't it? Not that we all want scraps, but that feels more. I know Lauren haven't been about, and it isn't quote unquote traditional, but you know what I mean here. Like that. That feels like that could have more heat eventually.
It's going to end up that there's nearly three up in that sort of wee triangle. What's a rather large triangle, to be honest. I don't think there's anything wrong with Carrick Lauren, but I just don't think there's that sort of competitive nature to that game. Is that rude to say? The teams are at opposite end of the tables, and it just ends up that Lauren win every time. But I definitely think that every time that the old Shane Hill derby's played, there's definitely a bit of meaty tackles going on and a bit of angst between the players. So I can definitely see it maybe becoming a wee sort of love triangle up at that neck of the woods.
Interesting. Well, decent way to get your first win as Ballymena manager, isn't it, for Oran Kearney against the boys he knows very, very well. This just sets up this Korean side as much as their second. This season's been bizarre. They've thrown so much at this side, but sometimes lack the fundamentals in big moments. And it's a big day for Dara O'Connor, who has been a forgotten signing due to whatever it is, injuries coming back. And there's 2 games, and it may be a little uplift that then he fades back into the background, but he took both goals really, really well. At the start of the season, you probably thought this could be a bit of a tasty difference maker. And now that he is up to speed in a sky blue shirt, it looks like he is.
The guy's quality when he was here before at both Glentoran and Cliftonville, I feel like he was a real good player to have in the Irish League. But 3 goals in 2 games is a really good way to sort off your Christmas period as such. So I just really think the Ballymena fans would wish that they could get him in that sort of that run of form, just like Jordan Stewart was with the Glens. A player like that, when they are A, on a run of form, and B, fit and available, are fantastic. And they're that player that, as we were discussing earlier, that gets you on the edge of your seat, that when they get the ball, you're ready to actually see what this guy's going to do, because everything he seems to be hitting at the minute's going in. So fair play to him. And yeah, as you said there at the start, I don't think it could actually have gone any better for Oran Kearney, in a way to get his first win. Boxing Day against Coleraine, I think that's fantastic for him. And yeah, Sky Blues will be very happy with that.
Yeah, it's another decent victory here for Ballymena on Boxing Day, and I'm still not quite sure what the rest of their season is going to look like. If they do go on a nice run, top 6 is in the mould, is in the window of opportunity. I think not that this game could have defined it, but if this is merely a bit of an upset and that they don't get their act into gear, that they could have been dragged down into 11th, and that's not totally out of the question based on the past few weeks' results. But with all the investment, and there's 2 new shiny toys coming their way in January, and Rakowski and Ebe, and no doubt they'll need time to bed in. But if they can still sneak up the 7th or 6th, this will feel a lot less of a potentially lost season for the Sky Blues, wouldn't it?
100%. I think that's why they sort of just decided to twist on the Jim Irvin, because they had backed him. They had given him plenty of funds available. They had signed a lot of good players. A mostly part-time team here, is what we're talking about when it comes to Ballymena. But when you look at that Ballymena squad, they were a lot on paper. They were a lot better than what their position suggested. On paper, I know that that's a totally different thing.
Big time.
Because when it actually comes down to the nitty-gritty of a game, whether you're better on paper or not doesn't really matter. It's how you perform on a pitch. But the transfers they made, I really like Torre. I think he's very good. Clark coming in steady hand at the back, really sensible signing. But Irvin was backed, and it was something that was done after a pretty tough season last year, very mixed bag of things. But the new manager in Kearney coming in and is now seemingly getting some results out of this team that Jim just wasn't getting. So listen, it's only a small start. It's a slight uplift in form, but they are a lot better than 11th place in this league. Whether they end up in that, sort of 6th, 7th remains to be seen. But listen, if there's a man that can do it, it's Oran Kearney.
Well, he did get one over on this Korean team, the polar opposite of Glentoran, and obviously they played last week. That loss after 3 wins on the bounce in the recent form table, they have frustrated, haven't they? Because they've shown the ability and they've shown that they have it in them to go on this title run. And I know I backed them at the start of the season, and when I see how good they can be going forward, you think, nice one, this is what I could see. And they've scored more goals than anybody else. But they're just looking and coming across as flat track bullies. And that will put not a huge amount of pressure on Rory Higgins, but he does have to go to the drawing board again, ever so slightly, and tinker here. It might just need a bit more fermenting as an 11, but they have left points on the table this season. And if they're sitting in fourth and somebody miss out in Europe, it'll be days like today where they'll be kicking themselves.
100%. Like, you go back to that form table as you were saying there, you know, lost two in a row, won three in a row, lost two in a row, drew one. So this Korean team are good, but this Korean team are not yet great. This team are not yet title challengers. Um, this team will be up there. I'm not doubting the fact, but this team is not a team that is going to run away with a league title at the minute. We saw against the Glens last week how quickly things can actually capitulate when things go wrong for them. I think personally, from what I watched in that game, I think they got a goal sort of out of nothing and were attempting to sort of let that carry them. The sending off then ends up in a bit of a nightmare for them. And a bit of a freak goal from Johnny Russell, who definitely did not mean to score that, by the way. It just leaves Korean in this another sticky wicket here. As we were saying earlier, where the Glens have won two in a row, Korean have now lost two in a row. And things are getting a little bit heated for them. I think Higgins he's no dozer. The guy knows the sport, knows his way around a sort of a problem. But I think he's now got himself into too big of a gap between them and Lauren right now. Lauren's two games in hand, and they're still 4 points ahead of him. Things could be getting very, very difficult for the chasing pack at the minute.
They announced a signing on Christmas Day. Chill, boys. But here comes another one of Rory Higgins' old boys. I think, I guess he's an ex-Derry boy in Jordan Akatunde. Another striker who is dropping away here. Like, there's a lot of weird smoke emerging around Shevlin. We obviously don't know how Akatunde will do within the Irish League. He has decent form both in the lower leagues of England and within the League of Ireland. Maybe not a massive goal getter when it comes to goals to game ratio. He was out. Was he in Finland with Haka?
Mm-hmm.
So he's coming back, albeit it's the worst team in the league. And are we expecting to see outs here because McGonagall's strangely got a bit of a run in this team recently? And I thought
Well, who hasn't been in the squad in the past two games, Peter?
who would that be?
Declan McManus.
It's strange. He came in as one of the first big, it felt like, acquisitions of Moneybags Korean.
Yeah.
And you thought, how is he going to share things with Shevlin? Are those going to be the boys together? And it's not totally Morrison-esque, but he's been in the team, he's been out of the team, and he hasn't dominated.
No, definitely not.
And the hype was, here's a guy coming from the Welsh League, which is similar but lower standard, who's banging them in. He's got a decent frame around him and should do at least something similar. And look, if it's 10 goals in 20 games, that kind of 1 in every 2, 1 in every 3, you may take it. But he hasn't even lived up to that as either, despite Corey and just banging them in.
Yeah. You look at his form for TNS. First season he was there, 28 goals, 28 games, 23 goals. Year after, 25 games, 30 goals. This year, 17 appearances, 2 goals. Just something's not ticking a box. Something's not happening. But him not being in the squad and Higgins signing another striker, would that not sort of, am I putting two and two together and getting 4 here, Peter? I don't know.
Well, I don't know if has he been injured or is he just out of the squad?
I genuinely don't know. But him being out of the squad and, well, not even really getting any game time either. The 2 games before that, he was on the bench. So I've heard a couple of wee things in and around the league about him maybe not staying on. So listen, that remains to be seen. But yeah, listen, Korean getting the business done early, which is something that them and Ballymena, as we had already said, have both done. But listen, we'll have to see what this guy turns out like, see what happens. And do Korean need another striker? Shevlin's not done anything wrong, but I just don't see anything wrong with having another striker there as another option, to be honest. But McGonagall's not the disgraced himself either recently, I must say, in his cameo appearances.
And probably feels like a nice player to have from the bench, but was definitely one that I penciled in McGonagall that other teams would be knocking on the door saying, well, boys, one of the more significant results of Boxing Day and of Friday, there's two teams that had a very good day and a very bad day. The one team that had a very good day, outside of just, oh, we won, isn't this great, is Lauren. I think they could be prepping the red and white ribbons here already. Blues felt like they won this title around this time last year. And in a situation where they're one down, late enough on in the game against Carrick Rangers, and they just come back in the 80th and 83rd minute, 2-1 away from home, whilst Linfield lose, Coleraine lose, they just create even more daylight. It is ominous if you're someone that doesn't support the Invermen.
Yeah, I think it's looking, as you say, more and more likely as this league goes on that it's going to be heading back to Inver Park come the end of April. I don't think there's anybody that will argue the fact that um, well, about a month ago we were in a three horse race, but we're definitely heading into some certain leader in that race and by some distance at the minute. Larne are sort of this sort of proverbial like a Manchester United of old or a Celtic of old as or certainly recently anyway. You know, you'll look at their score and go, oh goodness, Larne are 1-0 down. But you know, fine rightly, by the end of that game, you'll be turning your phone on, walking out of the match and say, oh, Flip Larne have scored two there, it's 2-1. And you know, it's the sign of champions going to somewhere like Taylor's Avenue, which is a tough place to go. You know, there's that old adage, that favourite one. It's just how champions do it, I think. It's definitely one of those games where you go to a tricky place, you go 1-0 down and you find it within yourselves and within that squad of players to get two goals very, very quickly. Also very, very late on in the game, which is just a sucker punch for Carrick because when that Paul O'Neill goal goes in, they haven't actually given them enough time to respond and given them any more chances. So listen, Lauren do what Lauren do, and they've done that throughout this season. A couple of wee blips here and there, but certainly look like the front runners for this title.
Absolute minor blips. Like you take out that Cooper goal earlier on in the season, and they're looking even better. Maybe this has been said in the media somewhere, but what could be said about Lauren, and you probably will be said about them, is that in the same way that Linfield, where they had all those years where maybe they won the league and then the next year they just weren't able to get it done, they usually claimed it back, and it's because they had title winners, players who have been there and done that before, and that is realistically what this Lauren side is from back almost to the top. Because well, yeah, Paul O'Neill you have right up to the top. These boys have been this. You know, this is not their first rodeo here, and when I would remember those classic, particularly Linfield teams that showed the dominance, they would be winning games like this with exactly the way Lauren did. You're 1-0 down, hasn't been particularly your great day, but you just get it done. You keep pumping, you keep turning the screw, and they have such a wonderful balance of being so firm at the back whilst also having just little sparking players who might totally drift out of the game for 70 minutes and then pop up and get it later on. It's a wonderfully crafted side, and we're totally slapped on going into the season, and I will totally put my hand up and say that. I think last year was so drab from them. I know, did they finish second still? But you just thought this is a team on a decline, but they pretty much just needed to reload, and they looked to have done that.
Yeah, 100%. Like as you're saying there, it's just across the board there with that squad. It just looks solid and sensible. There's no players there that are going to let you down, and I think that's where it's going to end up being a very, very good season for them. I personally wrote them off. I didn't think they had this in them. I had Coleraine down to win the league fair and square, and I checked my predictions there just before it came on, and I had Linfield second. I don't think there's anybody that thinks it's going to be Linfield second anymore. But just a real settled squad helps them as well. I think the rotation wise, when somebody gets injured, when something happens, they have someone who can just slot right in there and be, if not the same level as the player who has been replaced, a very, very close second to them. And I think that's going to serve them very well this season. You look across that team, there's goal scorers, there's creators, there's defensive sort of capabilities there as well. So time will tell, but I don't think that there'll be too many betting against Lauren lifting this title at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Looking sharp. Of course, they could wobble, but this felt like a game where they could wobble. They draw. They just aren't able to win away from home on Boxing Day. They did it. And of course, the other side of this coin here, when it comes to this game, is Carrick, who, despite being, let's say, spunky in a couple of games, and you're looking at that game at Windsor Park as well as a few others, they'll be bitterly disappointed looking back and thinking the points that were left on the board when it came to that Dungannon game 3-3. But they are just tripping over themselves week in and week out, and they clearly have something going forward and are able to be competitive in games, but they're just being outmatched time and time again, and particularly late on. We did have concerns about the age profile of this team, and you might say this is what happens when you have these players who have plenty of tread on the tire, or there's not a tread on the tire. They're falling out late in games.
Yeah, I've only seen Carrick once this season, and that was when they were playing ourselves. But I feel like that sort of analogy of the tiredness creeping in happened in our game too. A 1-1. It was 1-1 going into the 85th minute, and the Blues scored two in the last 10. That it's that sort of stage of a game when players who are maybe that slightly younger, sort of age profile, can find a bit more in the tank, but those sort of older, more experienced guys, maybe it's just not there for them. I mean, listen, they've done well this season in spells. That they've been difficult to beat at times is what I'm trying to say. You're not going up to Taylor's Avenue thinking we're going to win 4 or 5 here today. They're not coming to you and you're thinking, yeah, we'll definitely hammer them. There's every chance that they get dragged into this 11th place and stay there. Now they have 2 games in hand over Crusaders, but being dragged in there isn't really what Stephen Baxter would have wanted, obviously, for this season. But it's going to be a very, very tight one between them and a couple of other teams just to stay out of that 11th place, that dreaded playoff.
It does look as though we're starting to see a phrase that you coined, and that was the mid-table muddle. It's looking less muddled, and they're finding their lanes. And at the minute, having played 19 games, Carrick would shake your hand for 10th right now. And then where do they go from next season? We don't know. But as you said, hard to beat are in games. And as I talked about a few weeks ago, do you look at that and go, they've been in games and they're going to fall off, or that eventually these close games are going to go their way? They come off the back of 2 draws with Dungannon and Ballymena. So they're in there at the minute. They do have games in their pocket. And when I'm talking about teams who had a bad day, it's Glenavon. After everything looking like it was going right, last week, huge win, both from just grabbing the 3 points and all the emotion that came out with that, getting that win. They're a team that not only lose to the rivals on Boxing Day and make that now 16 points difference from Portadown. Now, Portadown were probably only a win or 2 away from really creating daylight between them and the other teams, but they win. Now, Carrick could have won. Obviously, Crews won. Ballymena won. So, last week you're talking, we're only, whatever it was, 5 points off Crews. Now that's back up to 8. It seems to be one of the more per games of the day. Portadown winning for the first time in donkeys at Shamrock Park against Glenavon on Boxing Day. Doesn't help by the fact that you haven't been in the league for feels like half that time. But it could have all ended in disaster. There was no oil in the floodlights.
There's no oil in the floodlights.
What is going on? That is Irish League behaviour. Someone text me just 2 words: Shambles Park. And I
Yeah,
thought,
it's
there,
common phrase now, to be fair. It is. Um, at least they got a wee extra break at half time. Look at it that way, will we?
well, somehow their game ended before mine at Dungannon, but we'll park that. No, it all ended fine, and people jumped to the rescue, etc., etc. But if that game had to be hooked at half time due to a floodlight issue, as simple as it was not an act of God. Let's just say it was there wasn't any oil. I don't know the validity of that, but if that was the case, I saw a photograph of the club putting up where there's a couple of fellas poking around and it looked like it was oil. Right? That's not. That would have been a disaster. It would have been a disaster.
That was a very, yeah. It would have been an absolute nightmare, absolute travesty for that to happen on the biggest day of the season, between two clubs that are very, very much um needing a result on Boxing Day, both for very different reasons. But I just don't know how this continues to happen. We saw it at the end. We saw it at the Oval last year, didn't we? The floodlights went out. I've been at a game at Windsor when the floodlights have gone out, to be fair. Um,
But was that like an electricity issue or
yeah, it
something?
probably was, but I mean, this is a man who has no idea about either electricity or oil. Talking about both these things. Um, I just don't know how it continues to happen in the modern game. I do not know how we're still talking about, oh, the floodlights went out at a game in Irish League in 2025, almost 2026. There has to be a better way to do things, isn't there? That surely just, I don't know.
Wow.
So solar power. How about it? What do we think? Yeah,
Could you
we'd go.
imagine?
Yeah,
Could you imagine? It It'd have been a good day for Portadown. Another win for them. That's pretty handy. It puts them up to 28 points. I reckon they're maybe a victory or two away from safety this season. I think 2 wins almost secures them 10th at least. And after what's been maybe a difficult couple of weeks for them, they're getting results here, and it hasn't been pretty, but they've done it. Let's talk about the goal. Clearly a foul. I'd be raging if I was Glenavon.
yeah, very silly one, wasn't it?
I think Alton Top is a very lucky boy and put it down. He just comes up with the hands and shoves over the opposition player, and maybe the referee thinks that's just a part of the tussle, but it definitely helps. There's about 3 players at the back there, wasn't there? Popping up and to get the goal, and then Portadown hang on. A big momentum shift for Portadown and against Glenavon. They're clearly not totally out of it yet. The Mourneview Miracle is somewhat on, but they're needing things to go their way, and what feels like a foul on their own defender, which is their critical goal against the rivals on Boxing Day, that is not things going
Yeah.
your way.
Just I would say Glenavon have now sort of turned this corner where things are reasonable, considering how bad it's all been.
Like beforehand, you see a lot of these teams that are going down in previous years in Newry and even that Portadown team a couple of years ago, where by the end of the season and maybe halfway through it, you go, this isn't a top flight Irish League team. You look really
Yeah.
cut away from anybody else. Glenavon are looking like a capable Irish League team at the minute.
Well, if it hadn't have all started so very poorly with, more red than the Manchester United Superstore, it's just turning that corner. They're actually getting results that are, it's not really like despicably bad results. When I watched Glenavon at Windsor Park at the start of this season, I said they are without doubt the worst team that I have seen this season. Now, Crusaders then came to Windsor Park, and I would say they are the worst that I've seen this season. The 4-0 victory for Linfield about 3 weeks ago. And then you go down to Mourneview, and I made the foolish mistake of saying to those who I was travelling with, oh, we'll be fine today, we'll win about four. Glenavon turn a corner and actually turn a screw and make it very, very difficult for Linfield to even start playing football. Now, Linfield's performance wasn't good enough that day either, let's be quite honest. But when you're looking at a team that in the last sort of month or so has beaten Glentoran and Linfield at home, that's not a team that should be going down in the Irish League, let's be honest. But it's those close encounters with other teams. They're losing by the odd goal here and there. Now, they were very, very poor against Crusaders up at Seaview, but they're losing by the odd goal. Things are looking slightly on the up, but I think that just that desperate start to the season is gonna be the end of them. I think it's too it's a massive mountain to climb.
You think they're gone?
Like before this podcast, before I checked the league table, I didn't know that they only had 12 points, and they were also three games in the bank ahead of Carrick. It's just a case
Mm.
of where they pick up those games, if they're or those points, because if they're able to beat those teams around them that they're losing by the odd goal to, then we're talking about a very, very different thing. But they don't look diabolically bad anymore, and I don't believe that they were
Yeah.
yesterday either. Not one for the purists, obviously. Very, very a tight
Clearly.
game. But listen, if they can pull a couple of results out of the bag against the likes of Carrick, Crusaders, all those teams in around them, we could be looking at a miracle here. But I think just the start of the season has left them too far gone.
They've got Dungannon at home, which you might describe as potentially winnable. Then Ballymena on Saturday the 3rd. So, particularly that Ballymena game, that's in the quote unquote winnable category. And then I think their games against Bangor could be very key as well. So, it's kind of like you've got to beat the teams in your own weight category. But at the minute, they've seemingly just are shocking the likes of Glentoran and the Blues. So yeah, you would say a winnable game where they come up with nothing. They'll be immensely irked by the decision when it
Yeah,
comes to the goal. But the Ports go marching on. Glenavon do not. And adding to that frustration is that Crews break their losing streak by beating the Reds. I mean, a very boisterous Crews fan has been messaging me saying, you said there was only going to be one result in this game, and it wasn't a Crews win, and the Crews won. So after a couple of results, this is pretty significant for the Crews.
massively. I would be in the same camp as you when it came to who I thought was going to win that game on Boxing Day, and I certainly wasn't putting um, any sort of thought into a Cruise win. But my goodness, when I checked the score after the game, and I saw that it was 2-1 Crusaders, I was really, really, I was shocked, Peter, a real shock. Is how I sort of felt. But listen, Crusaders had to pull something out of somewhere. They couldn't be as bad and as turgid as they were for 100% of the season, let's be honest. As I said there, I thought they were very, very poor when they came to Windsor there recently. But big day on Boxing Day, and unlike that, Blues Glens game, form did go out the window.
It did, yeah, totally did. Now, I will say this, and I did talk about this, in that I feel as though, as much as Cliftonville were getting results, they were stepping up in games and having good phases and getting the goals. You do look at this Cliftonville side and say there isn't a boatload of difference makers, and with youth, you will have inconsistency, and they don't scream 1 to 11 all game winners either. So I think something like this, they could be frustrated and are probably better suited to maybe playing away from home, being a bit more defensively strong. And, there is talk about Casey and Keeney skedaddling come January. They would be massive losses there. But again, it's hard to really talk too much about Cliftonville long term because they're totally held in stasis with this takeover or non takeover. Like it just feels like this is what you've got. It almost feels not totally like a transfer ban, but you would say that if they could start molding this squad, even to the levels where they have done in the past 2 years, like how can they build a team where they don't know what shopping aisle they're going to be in?
Yeah, 100%. Like that's a really good sort of analogy. You can't go out shopping without knowing what budget you have. Do you know what I mean? You can't go into a shop and say, I'm going to spend 30 quid here. Oh, hang on, I've only got three. Do you know what I mean? That's where things are going to be very difficult for them. The squad is the squad. Where I'm going to have to say one positive thing about Cliftonville, it shows the strength of their youth setup, that this is where they're at. They are in a lot of trouble that way
Totally.
financially. As in they don't know whether they're going to stick or twist, but they have this strong academy that they can look to and find so many good starting players, players who other clubs won't even have had a sniff at because they've just been Cliftonville through and through the academy. And I think that's a massive sign of something good going on at Cliftonville, but they really need to get that sorted before things step into a January transfer window without any idea of who's going to be available to be signed or who would even want to come to the club at the minute because it's such a mess board wise, and I can tell by online frustrations of fans. It seems to be week by week that they have more questions than answers. It seemed that in the summer that it was
Yes.
all, done and dusted, good as new, just shortly before the summer probably. But now it's just this real guessing game for fans and players alike.
This time last year, we could see that Coleraine had finally got themselves sorted after a weirdish summer where they could build for next year. Cliftonville, and this is regardless if they're going to be a mid-table team or not, they need to start thinking about next year as well. Like, what contracts are they going to be able to hand out in January? You see other sides, even if it was 18-month contracts, they're tying a few of these players down. Do Cliftonville have the ability to go, Mick Woods, do you want another year? We don't know. And you do take Sheridan and Hawthorn out of that team altogether as the fines that they have had this year, and the squad looks even more threadbare than it currently is. There's nice bits of experience. Gormley's nice to bring off the bench. Glynn's back into the team, and Connor Pepper is such a great cog for them to fire pretty much anywhere within the first two lines of midfield and defence. But a loss there doesn't totally derail them, but it does put they'll stick in their spokes as they try to really nail down a top six place. Huge for the Crews. This is a team that are falling over themselves defensively, and away from home they're able to get 2 goals, both from set pieces, and it doesn't cure all their ills. But when you're down at the bottom, points are hard to come by, especially 3. And I still do think that they would shake your hand like Carrick would for 10th at the minute. But 8 points, 1 game in hand over Glenavon. It's a lot. It's bigger breathing room than it could have been at the start of the day. You flip that round, and it would have been down to 2 points, would it? Yeah, if you gave Glenavon 15,
Yeah.
that's where 12th, and 12th still in the realm of possibility, I would say, with the Crews, unless they do get a bit of consistency. 42 goals conceded, ouch. And the whole Brighton goal scoring feat, you do look back to it, could it be a statistical anomaly? But hey, this could be the start of them pushing on. I just don't know if I see it just yet, despite Adam Ritchie
Yeah,
dying for Cruise fan. Adam Ritchie messaged me saying, no, you're wrong. He would want to see me wrong.
we think of a Crusaders team, and the first thing that we think of in years gone by is defensive stability and a strong midfield. And those are two things that Crusaders have been massively lacking this year. I think that it's their sort of end of things. Defensively has always been a sort of like a stalwart and maybe one other younger player. The likes of when they had Jimmy Callagher alongside someone else. When I watched that Crusaders team, certainly at Windsor Park, now I've watched them at Seaview against Glenavon as well. Um, but when I saw them at Windsor, they just looked totally devoid of a leadership, sort of like a mentor in that either in the midfield or in the defensive line. That's a young team compared to what we're used to with Crusaders. I think they've all obviously gone up the Carrick. Anybody who played for the Crews last year, as we know, that old joke. But for what for the pieces that Declan Cadell has to play with, I think he's doing okay. I don't think he's obviously not having a fantastic season, but with what he has actually to work with, he's done okay. If he manages to slip them out of that dreadful sort of playoff thought or situation, I think that's as good as he can offer this season. Based with, as I say, with what he's got. Um, Apparently Thorndike had a fantastic game yesterday, from what I've heard. And that's a signing that's come in there. was a bit sort of maybe left field. I didn't actually know that he was a free agent from the Glens last summer. So for them to pick him up, fair play, fantastic. Games that I've been at, I've seen him. He hasn't looked fantastic, but apparently really, really good yesterday, and that'll be a welcome 3 points for Cadell.
Carrick, 2 games in hand, only 2 points behind the Crews. So I think they know exactly where they are. And I'm starting to wonder, could Bangor be in this conversation very soon? It was a game between them and Dungannon, which I was at. I was loving the Swifts for the first 45. They get an early goal through Adam Glennie, and that's all that was required to win the game. First 45, they were pinging that ball up about the place with ease. Bangor were sweating. They were using every inch of that pitch. Bigorama doing his thing where he drops even deeper than the two centre backs. And despite all that, they aren't able to use that dominance to expand and extend their lead and end up that the very direct Bangor were able to make them sweat. Danny Wallace, Ben Arthur's not a good matchup from a Dungannon Swifts point of view. Loads of penalty calls, but after a less than exciting second half for the Swifts, they get the win, and they're looking like a nailed on top six side if they keep up with what they're doing. They'll look at the Glenavon game as another opportunity to build points, and they're one of these teams that are higher in the division around teams that have played less games than them. But I still think top six is an excellent season for the Swifts. But I do think perhaps that game on Boxing Day shows that they maybe could do with a more killer touch, that you can ticky-taka and pass it around all you want. If you aren't testing the keeper consistently, what's it all about?
Yeah, I always feel that when I'm watching Dungannon that there's always, there's this lovely sort of build-up play, and there's no one to stick it in the back of the net at the other end of the pitch. It's something.
And I mean, the lovely is as a definitely word to describe it. I thought no other Irish League team is playing like
No,
this.
I thought that even.
So fluid, so fit, are great on the ball. But I reflected on it afterwards, going, yeah, but that's great that Sean McAllister's going from centre midfield out to wide, pinging it in. But so what if it's not really getting past the second
Yeah,
defender?
they're lovely to watch, but I totally agree with you. There's no sort of end product for it. It's one of those ones where you feel like if they're able to get a 15 goal a season striker, not even a 20 goal a season like wonder striker, that would be a totally different ball game, and we'd be talking about Dungannon disrupting this sort of four at the top that we have at the minute, and they'd be dead certs to be top six. Um, but if they could even get a 10 goal striker in after Christmas, that's when something becomes a real question mark. Now, whether they get anybody in or not's another thing, but I think if Junior pulls his socks up and things start happening up there, that's when that's when we're talking about a Dungannon team really being a disruptor in the Irish League, because I totally agree with you. There's no other team in the league that plays like them.
Junior didn't have his best game, and I think an Andy Mitchell fit and firing could really add something to that team. But let's move to Bangor, because they were the hotly tipped, much loved boys at the start of the season. Not surprisingly, results wise, the curve has been in a downward direction. They are very direct as a team, and I think sometimes you look at them and go, you lack a wee bit of proficiency on the ball, and there's a decent amount of reliance on Arthur's getting out. There's plenty of fight in this team, but Arthur's being the man in the box. Arthur's being able to use that one-on-one ability and kind of use those matchups to your advantage and to get the goal. We're not expecting to be world beaters, but I do think, despite being competitive in games, with 25 points, 21 games played, they're 5 points behind Crews with the same amount of games played. Ballymena behind them on 24, so maybe they'll be a part of it. But I am expecting a bit of a three, you might call it four-way tussle with Glenavon in there, but Bangor, Crews and Carrick could all be the teams fighting to finish 10th rather than 11th.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I was again listening to that previous episode with you and Ross and Joe, where you were basically saying that bangers sort of average themselves out is a really good way to put it, I think. That they came in all guns blazing start of the season, and it was like, wow, what's this? All these people who, weren't actually expecting them to be anywhere near a decent sort of football side. Oh, they're coming up from the championship. They must go back down again. I think anybody with a brain knew that this Bangor side were gonna cause a bit of hassle in the Irish League this year. But we all know fine rightly. Look at Loughgall of 2 years ago, came up, caused a lot of trouble, got points where they really shouldn't have got points, but in the end, the next year they drift off and things become sort of back to norm again. But I think that's what's going to happen with this Bangor team. They've had this really, really excellent start to the season, but things are curving off into more sort of the mean. As such, they are not a bad footballing side as we've seen. They're going to pick up points, in real sort of curveball situations. But it's these games against those teams that are down near them that need to be sort of a case of we're going to go down here and we're going to get 3 points. They'd never seem confident in doing that, I
No.
don't think.
Home is where the heart is for them.
100%, 100%, and it has to be because if you make home a fortress, then you've picked up the points where you need them, and away games, anything's a bonus really. So listen, they've come up, they've done really really well so far, but after Christmas it's going to be another case of knuckling down and seeing where else they're going to pick up some points from to stay out of that 11th place.
Yeah, big games against Carrick and Glenavon and Crusaders incoming for Bangor. Not exactly coming up, but over the next while, that's where their season will be defined, and at least they do have a difference maker in Arthurs. Looking ahead then to Tuesday night, we no longer have the New Year's Day games, which I feels as though that's locked in now. We're not going to have New Year's Day again unless it falls the right way calendar-wise. Do you miss New Year's Day?
Don't really mind. I'd rather have a game on a Tuesday night, to be quite honest. Don't
It's
like it out of
it's nice to
Wednesday.
get another game quickly after Boxing Day,
Yeah,
isn't it?
100%.
Because your fans either feel brilliant, the momentum's there, and they want to go out and see their team again if they're still at home, potentially between Christmas and New Year's. So that's nice. But also, if you're down in the dumps and you're frustrated, you might want to come out and go, right, let's fix this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if Linfield had a wee break, that would be great. But it's not going to happen. So, yeah, straight into it on Tuesday night.
Let's start with your Blue Men, because there's a chance to bounce back for them. Wow, look at that. Coleraine away. That's fun on a Tuesday, isn't it?
Yeah, not massively looking forward to this one, to be honest. We've played Coleraine twice this season, a 2-all draw, which we were 2-0 up in away, and a 1-all draw at home, which we were 1-0 up in, Andrew. Based on what I've seen, things need to improve and improve quickly from both teams. Obviously wasn't at any of those Coleraine games, but results wise, two poor results in a row. Um, what I saw from the Glens game wasn't a great performance from them. Um, likewise, Linfield very very poor performance against Glentoran, but I think Higgins has to have them up for it. It has to be a case of um a win for Coleraine because this is their chance to step up and put a wee bit more pressure on Lauren. I'm gonna go out there on a limb and say this. Anything else but a win for Linfield ends the title. That's it. It's gone. I would argue that it's already slipped away.
Yes.
But I believe that we need to go to the showgrounds, and if we do not win, that's it, totally gone, and we're now playing for, just for the crack for 6 months here. So based on that and what actually happens in the Irish League, what needs to happen never happens. So I'm gonna go 1-1.
Yeah. I'm in draw mode here because there are two teams. If there is a victor here, one of these sides will have lost three in a row.
Yeah. And the real victor from that game is
Lord,
Lauren. Yeah,
Lord is like,
yeah.
let's
Lauren,
go.
Lauren win. Lauren win.
Lauren win
So
again.
yeah, I'm gonna say 1-1 for that one.
What if it was to be? I would agree with you, and I feel it's going to be a catchphrase between now and the end of the season that Lauren's already got this in the bag outside of a mega falling off of form. If there's a loss here, what does the rest of the season look like for Linfield? Because they still need to get Europe and secure that. And as we've previously said, only second really does guarantee you Europe.
Yeah,
So there's still plenty to play for. But from just a mentality point of view, if the title's gone, can you do a thing where you're looking ahead to next season while also still trying to get things done this year?
I mean, it's a really tricky one because I've only actually had to experience the Blues in the playoff once. Blues have either been, first or
Yes.
second in this last couple of years. The season that we were in the playoffs, we were absolutely terrible, and the Glens humped us at Windsor to get to the final. We didn't even reach the final that year, so it's not one that I would be particularly fond of doing. Um, but I also don't think that we're actually playing well enough at the minute to grab a second place.
Yep.
I'd actually argue there's a higher chance of us finishing fourth than there is of us finishing second the way we're playing at the minute. Obviously, there's plenty of corners to be turned and road to be travelled, but I just genuinely do not think that we're good enough to deserve an automatic European place. We saw in the summer the sort of lack of sensible performances in Europe from Linfield, totally devoid of any structure or shape in a lot of games. Of the eight that we played in Europe, I don't think we played well. Yeah, we maybe played well in a quarter of those games. Um, but in those, you need to be on your ball to be playing well in Europe for next summer. And I don't think we're anywhere near that. So it might actually, well, financially it won't be a blessing in disguise, but a summer off to actually rebuild and replace what we have at the club at the minute might be required. But we shall have to wait and see. But yeah, definitely not in the minute, mate. I'm really, really struggling to see us turning the corner here.
Promise this is not a loaded question. What do you think Linfield will have learned from the two previous meetings with Coleraine already? Because I do believe that you kind of got away with it in those two games. Like, you do take the lead, at least away from home. And then, to be honest, if there was maybe only 5 more minutes left of that game, Coleraine would have eventually gone there and won it. But what does he take from those two games where I don't think you were really even close to being the better team in either of them? And it could have been very much different results on both occasions. And you take that into, as you said, a potentially season-defining game away from home.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty worrying that your season defining games are happening before it's actually 2026 yet. Um, but I think if Linfield had a turned the screw and were anywhere near sensible in that the away game at the end of October, I think Linfield could have gone in 3 or 4 nil up before Coleraine made their subs of Kane and Lyons Foster on. They were all over the place at the back. Harrison goals that night was having an absolute stinker. Every ball that was coming in to the box, he was flapping at or struggling. You look at the goals that night, and the corner that came in for Fitzpatrick's goal, it should have been dealt with 100%. Same with Roscoe's one. But as you say, Coleraine grew into the game and were able to actually, steal a draw. And as you say, if there had been another 10 minutes in that game, would have been looking at Coleraine winning. Same in the game in November. If we would have had another 5 or 10 minutes in that game, we'd have been looking at Coleraine beating Linfield at home, which would totally wrote off the season, to be quite honest. But what have we learned? Take your chances against this Coleraine team because they'll come up and take yours.
Yeah.
That's all I will say on that. You need to bite when you can against Coleraine because they will 100% give you something to worry about in any stage of a game.
It is 1-1 in my eyes, which doesn't really help anybody. You could argue it knocks both teams out of the title race, not officially, but in all but
Yeah, and all but mathematical
maths.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
all
know.
but mathematical points, because again, these teams are faltering against lower teams. They are taking points off each other, but Larne just glides through the centre and are able to do what they do. Funny, if there's one team that does give them a tiny bit of trouble, it has been Cliftonville, both home and away. But of course, we all remember that game where Cliftonville got tanked. Was it 8-0 or something bonkers?
Oh, it was a long time ago, but yeah, eight, I think.
Pretty much
8-1.
pretty much gifting the title to Larne at that point. It's not as much on the line for Cliftonville. I feel as though not there was much on the line on that occasion, but this is a game where if Cliftonville come out, a scrappy 1-0, 2-1 loss, it really doesn't irk them. But they've had the chance to be the spoiler for Larne previously. Do you expect them to do that, especially off the back of a pretty frustrating loss to their rivals in the Cruise? Saying that there's a bit of spice between these two teams. There's probably more spice between Larne and there's pretty much probably more spice between Larne and Cliftonville than there is between Ballymena and Coleraine, maybe.
Oh, a big statement, but yeah, there's definitely spice there. Definitely spice. So from what I've read and what information's available to me, Cliftonville haven't actually won at Inver Park since January 2022. So any man that's going to say that Cliftonville are going to go up the road and get 3 points is a very brave man. But my goodness, will they make it tough for Larne? I think that I think Larne will have to huff and puff as they have done all season. But I think they'll just huff and puff just hard enough, if you know what I mean. And I think they'll just have the ability to push Crusaders, or sorry, Cliftonville aside, despite their poor result against the Cruise there. I just think Larne have it in them. And as we've said, if there's things going on at the Reds that aren't quite right, I think it's all going right for Larne, in the opposite way. So yeah, in my head, it's 2-0 Larne.
Larne are, I think, in the way they're set up right now, are a bad matchup for the Reds, and I would argue some of that attacking talent should have a bit of joy at home. I think this could be like a 3-0.
Oh my goodness, right, okay.
But not a total stuffing. I just think that Larne could be very effective in the way that they attack and knocking that ball in. Maybe they need another bit of late magic from Benji McGee, but I could see it 3-0, 3-1 perhaps, or maybe just 2-0 and cruising. This is a game that definitely doesn't have the heat it used to. Glentoran, Portadown. Glen should be favoured in this significantly at home against the Ports, but you never know.
Yeah, it is a case of you never know. I just think that the Glens at the Oval are a very, very difficult team to beat, from what I've seen in this season. And I just think they'll have enough to beat Portadown. I've gone 2-0 Glens. I could maybe see it being a draw if things go very, very well for Portadown. But we shall see. Portadown did beat the Glens last year at the Oval though, in a very, very funny night. Very much enjoyed that. That late Ryan Mays goal, very, very good. But yeah, that's sort of an enigma in all those results between these two teams. So I'll stick with my 2-0 Glens.
Yeah, I'm probably backing you there. 2-0, maybe just 1-0, and Glentoran are holding back the Ports as they try and grab a second one, but don't get it, but do get the points. Bangor Ballymena, Clandy Boy. This was a bit of a strange game earlier on this season where Ballymena eventually won 3-2 due to some calamity at the back when it came to Bangor. You would probably say Ballymena, especially if Dara O'Connor's rocking and rolling, they should get something here. I think this is going to be a bit of a strange 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I've gone 1-1 myself actually. Written down on paper here. So, I mean, Ballymena had a couple of good results against them this year. Obviously, 2 wins in a row, but I can't split the two at the minute, especially.
If you take out those 2 Bangor results, I know you could do this for a lot of teams with many other teams, but if you do take away those 6 points that they got, it'd feel a bit more sweaty for Ballymena, wouldn't it? One of those games, Bangor had like a child in nets.
Well, you take away Linfield's 2 wins against Bangor and think our away form means we'd only have something like 4 points or something. Yes. So if we're going to keep doing that, we can work away at that. I think it's a tricky one for Kearney going down there, just to see exactly what way Bangor set up and things. I think it's a difficult one. So I think 1-1 is a fair one there.
It probably doesn't help either of them, not that they're massively worried. 21 games played each, 24-25. Like a win for either side would ease any sort of fear that they're going to be brought in to the 11th, as much as I have them pegged to potentially be in that. So it would be a very welcome 3 points for either team. So let's see who jumps up and eventually does maybe grab it. We look at Glenavon, Dungannon Swifts. I think this is going to be a 2-2 here. Dungannon are really starting to show some frailties at the back. Glenavon can punish you, particularly if they start early enough, but in turn aren't exactly rock solid along that back line themselves. I think a draw probably helps neither of them, but I can see Glenavon actually get another victory at home. They have been good at home. That's where their best performances have been.
Yeah, there's definitely fire in the bellies of Glenavon to try and fight on and stay up in this league. Of course there is. I think they'd really be asking questions if that wasn't the case for the players. But as we discussed earlier, actually it's those sort of top six teams that are coming down to Mourneview Park, and struggling. So every chance that well, are Dungannon this top six team, as we were discussing earlier, are Dungannon going to be the top six team? Going by previous results, quite possibly. Um, I just I don't, as I discussed earlier as well, I don't see where Swifts are getting 2 goals from to beat them. So I'm gonna go for 1-1 in this game.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't think there's enough firepower in that Swifts team.
And then we'll wrap it up with a huge game at the bottom. Crews against Carrick. We all know what this looked like to kick off the season. You might argue this is the game that's going to provide all of the entertainment. We will sit back and see. It's nice to have all 6 games at the same time. If you're an Irish League sicko like me, I haven't been given a job on Tuesday, so I won't be there at any of the games, but I'll be loving either being out of the game, but also listening to all the mayhem that you hope is going on via Sports Sound. Whoever's at that game could have a busy day. Crews Carrick, I think a victory here is a massive tone setter for the next while. Crews coming off the back of a victory over Cliftonville. Do you back either side here?
I'm going to back the home team based on what has happened recently. There are goals in that Crusaders team that I don't know if Carrick have. Um, Apart from that 3-3, of course. But I just think Crusaders have to be up for it. From when I was down at Seaview for the Glenavon game, that to me felt like a must win for them to actually sort of kick Glenavon a wee bit further down the table. I think Cadell will be able to get them up for the must win game again. He got them up for a really, really good game on Boxing Day, but as we've seen, Carrick are very, very difficult to beat at times. I'm not going to go for a thumping. I'm going to go Crews 2, Carrick 1.
I am the other side. I think it's going to be.
Oh,
I'm going to go Carrick 2, Crews 1. I think there might be just a bit more guile as we've seen in this Carrick team. I think both teams will score. But I think there could be a bit of a bump for the Crews, and Crews fan Adam Ritchie is sitting here with his hand clenched saying, "Do not spite us again," but I shall. And could keep things even more spicy at the bottom. But Mark, another festive period pod with yourself. It's very nice to have you around.
yeah, it's the hat trick now, Peter. You must be getting really fond of it. This is tradition now, isn't it?
I'm not saying everybody else said no. I'm just saying you were the first person to say yes.
There we go. Maybe everybody else had, really, really
Things to do.
important things to do. I've been busy today myself, so I squeezed you in, Peter. We'll pencil that. We'll say that now.
Well, I very much appreciate it. My family think I'm bonkers and think surely people are just the games are over. They don't need one over the Christmas period, but here we are. Boom, 4 years in a row. Giving you your Boxing Day podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are listening at this point and you're thinking I could do with more of these, good. If you're not a mega fan and haven't listened to the last few previous weeks, I highly recommend you jump on them because lots of fun things covered. We were talking a lot about NIFL TV with Stuart Cherry last week. We've had big ones talking about Oran Kearney taking over Ballymena, as well as our January transfer preview pod, which came out a couple of weeks ago. So lots to enjoy there and listen back if you just happen to not be able to grab it as you buzzed around and got your Christmas shopping done. Was Santa good to you, Mark? I know you would love a new striker in a blue shirt, maybe clogged up in that chimney that you can pull down and fire on there on Tuesday, but get anything nice.
Oh yeah, lots of nice stuff. Got some new golf balls, which will be rapidly lost on my first round back on Monday.
Excellent. Sounds groovy. If you would like to give me a little gift, everybody, you can of course subscribe to this podcast on whatever your platform is, on the Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just go to the main page and click there, and of course follow this pod on Just Kick a Match, because nobody else thought that was a good name for anything, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as TikTok. Mark, thanks again. I'll see you around soon.
Yes, Happy New Year, sir. All the best.
Happy New Year.